Yeah, I mean, this camp was designed for those players to have a competitive international match, and a period of time in the desert conditions to acclimate and to see where the players are at. We've been monitoring, tracking players. They're on individual programs. They're in daily training environments where you're assessing numbers, but you need to get that fingertip feel as a coach. You need to see them competing in a meaningful game to really understand where they're at before any final selection can be made. So we have players returning from injuries. We have players that haven't played competitively since October the 8th. And this group probably have never been together before. So it's definitely going to be a learning experience, I think, through this 5-6 day camp that we have in Bahrain. But very valuable for us in our preparation, as well as the assessment and final selection of this team. Yeah, it's been a tough morning, Neil. Prior to this call, myself and the medical team had that call with Scott. He's sitting in Germany in a lot of pain at the moment, just post-op on that shoulder. And we looked at every angle of trying to bring him into this World Cup squad and getting him back. But the type of injury, there's no way back for Scott, unfortunately. And yeah, he was devastated this morning. And he's going to be a big loss. I think for anyone that knows Scott, he's just a good man, a good human being in the environment. He has great character, always seems to contribute in a quiet way, and very, very reliable on the field. So he will be a big loss to this group on and off the field. And yeah, just one of those tough moments as a coach where you've got to share that grim reality with someone. Never easy. Oh, really happy for them. I think Alfonso looks like he's really enjoying his football this season. Seems to be getting a bit more freedom, and it was nice to see, Bayern giving him a rest as well. I think that helps. They're sort of rotating him in the squad so he can go in fresh and excited to play. So I mean, that's important for Canada. That's for sure. We just touching wood that they're able to stay fit and healthy. They've got a lot of games, these players. And then, Stefan scoring goals against big teams. He's really evolving his profile as a midfielder at Porto. And if anyone sees his sort of physical stats, I mean, he's running marathons every single game. So, really proud of his progression. I think his story is a real sort of testament to that Canadian grit and then that willingness to stay humble and just keep pushing. And yeah, happy to get him back. He's evolving as a leader. We've been speaking quite frequently now as he's on one of our sort of tactical architects committees, and yeah, he's excited to come in. And like I say, Johnny, I mean, he's in a esteemed company with his goal scoring record. So, having those three players in good form is really important for Canada. Yeah, I mean, I've got 26 players in mind. There's a group of staff that have been working diligently over the last 4 months, compiling all the permutations of what 26 players might look like and what we need. But there's a reality check, every single week that there are changes. No one predicted what had happened to Scott, which was so innocuous. He could fall 10 times and that would happen only once, and it happened. So I think we know that there are other elements of the roller coaster we're going to have to ride on this journey in the next couple of weeks with the amount of games players are playing. But coming into Qatar, it is an assessment period. I mean, these players, there's been just under 40 players that have helped us qualify for this World Cup. One of the missions for this program was to expand our roster pool when we first took over in 2018. And yeah, 39 guys have competed in that 20 plus qualifying journey. So we got a lot of players that are there or thereabouts in this selection, and some really difficult decisions on, that 6-7 players in your roster. So people are going to be pushing for selection. Players we've brought in, some of them have had terrific MLS seasons. Some of them have been competing in Europe, and others are, there to sort of just make sure they prove that they're at that fitness and physical match fitness level that we can rely on them to contribute in Qatar. Yeah, I mean, we've had staff monitoring his scrimmages at TFC, the last 2 scrimmages, and the feedback has been super positive. He seems to be, really having an impact on the field, and looking back to his old self. I mean, playing international football in desert conditions is going to be a bit different to what he's experiencing now in his club training environment. But, he can only do what he can do in that environment, and everything he's doing has been positive at this stage. So, fingers crossed there's been no setbacks from, the injury that was holding him back, and he seems to be in a positive place. Yeah, they've had an absolutely terrific season, and I really enjoyed watching, the chemistry and the team spirit, the camaraderie in that group. I think there's some similarities in the playing style. I think there's elements, Kamal plays at the same position he does for Canada, with Montreal, and certainly Ali has that hybrid sort of centre-back, wing-back type role where he can slot in both. Saint-Pierre, it plays the same role, in that holding midfield, or in the, that double pivot at the bottom of the box for us, and Isma's played in similar positions. So there's a lot of similarities there, and I think, Canada have always tried to play football in games where, we feel we can really impose our identity. So, just having them coming in confidence is the exciting thing. I mean, the guys were on a hell of a roll and playing some really good football. So the fact they've played right up till the last, almost the last window for MLS was really important as well, because they're as close to match rhythm as I'm getting a lot of these players. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to feel their energy coming into the environment. I think they can really contribute. And I think on the flip side, I think the international experience and the high of Canada's qualification for players like Kamal, Saint-Pierre, Alistair Johnson, Zach Broguillard, those players were coming into Montreal on the height of confidence, believing that, that they can do anything now as Canadians, having finished top of CONCACAF. So I think, it's just been a good all-round year for Canadian football for these players. Yeah, it's a great question. I think when you look at, a lot of the World Cups that I've been to, and they've been 23-player World Cups, and then you sort of analyze how rosters form and how you rotate players over these periods, you normally see around 17 players form the mass amount of minutes in a World Cup roster. So, those 17 are pretty much in your mind already. You can sense there's a group of players that are going to probably maximize the minutes in a World Cup. And then outside of suspensions and injuries, there's a group of players that will be supporting and backing up in certain positions. I mean, it has a very different cadence to that World Cup qualification path, where you are having to rotate players, from game to game based on, maybe 6 hours of travel, plus shifting from heat to, ice conditions, playing on turf, and then going into a soggy, football environment where the pitch is going to demand and challenge people differently. A World Cup is, you're in one venue, you've got limited travel, you've got a 3-day turnaround or a 4-day turnaround between games. So you know that players are going to recover, regenerate, and you can rely on the players that are playing at the highest levels, that are coming in the highest match rhythms, in the highest form. So I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to work out, who those players are. And again, like what we'll say, it is typically 16, 17 players on average that would max the majority of minutes. So, that next layer of player is really important, because, those are players that have got to be ready. They've got to have that mental ability to maintain readiness. They've got to be able to contribute to the team in ways that other players don't have to contribute. It's that ability to stay connected, to be a good teammate, to bring the positivity to an environment, and to challenge and compete. And those are all important qualities that we look for. I think I'm fortunate that I have experienced 39 players across this campaign. I've had a chance to learn about these players, as well as I think formulate a really tight culture where I understand which players can tolerate what and who will be good for the team through this period of time. So, when you've had 2 years of intense qualification, you're not far away from knowing, who those players are at this stage. And, I think coming into Bahrain, for some players, they've still got to prove that they're at a level that I can select them. And for others, they have a chance to push themselves closer to the thinking for that 26-man roster. And for some, it might be if there is something happens in an injury situation in the next couple of weeks. And for others, it could be just a performance that gives you an idea that they're in better form than somebody else. I think everyone's still competing. It's such a tricky period of time, these next 2 weeks. You just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you've just seen Pogba, N'Golo Kante, Varane, Lukaku. There are things, Scott Kennedy this weekend, just things that you never anticipated, but things are going to happen. So every player in this roster is competing for an opportunity and trying to stake their claim to make sure that they are that next man up, or they push their way into that final selection. Yeah, big questions. Look, I think we're all proud of what Jonathan's achieved in France. He's, not only been up there on a number of occasions with the top scorers in one of the top leagues in the world, but he's also won a French title. And as you've said, he's still a young man with the best part of his career ahead of him. So I think this World Cup is a real opportunity for him to show his class and quality on the world stage. For Canada, he's always showed up to every single game that, whether we've played in Haiti, St. Kitts, wherever we've had to go, he's never shirked that call. And I think that tells you a little bit about, why he's successful. There's a real passion behind his desire to perform for club or country, and his humility. Just this, he doesn't see himself bigger than anyone else. He just is a guy that loves the game, loves competing, and I think more importantly, loves representing Canada. And on his pathway, I think it really speaks to this Canadian pathway. And I think a lot of evidence out there suggests that, we can over-constrain the pathway to excellence for players. I think in Canada, we show that it's a very non-linear, dynamic system. And players just need opportunities to, at the right time, move into the right environments. And I think for Jonathan, he had a great support network in Ottawa, people who just kept him grounded and supported him in those training environments he was in. I think he speaks highly of his youth coach that, has guided him and mentored him for a period of time. And, he didn't leave Shores until around 16, 17. And when he left Shores, he's going into a top academy system, but he's never had that love of the game knocked out of him as a youngster. he's been allowed to enjoy a pretty visceral experience of football without the pressures of academy football and all the things that come with that as a youngster. So I think it just shows there's a lot of pathways to the top in football, and Jonathan has had a real solid support network. And from what I can see, he just loves the game. He's always watching the game. If he's not playing FIFA in the environment with his mates, he's talking about watching a game, or he's on tactical architect meetings with the coach and some of his peers, talking about tactics going into games. He has a real healthy obsession for the game. I mean, every game we're monitoring, you've just got that sort of pit in your stomach that you're going to lose a critical player. But I think it's going to happen. I mean, these things happen. Losing Scott Kennedy was awful. I mean, it's because it's, what's coming. It's the conversations that you've got to have with the player, and it is tough. But I'd say, look, I mean, if you'd said we'd go 7 games in a 14-game qualification campaign without Alphonso Davies and still finish top of CONCACAF, and get a 9-point window in the January period without him, no one would have backed Canada to have achieved that. So I do know that we've built a strong culture here. We have got a good next man up sort of chemistry in this group, but we are aware that this is the world stage now. This is next level. It's not CONCACAF, and you do need these players. The top players need to be there. Well, the Scott thing's raw. I mean, it's really raw. We've just had like a really difficult conversation, and got to see what it means to someone when it's taken away. It was tough. That was a real difficult moment this morning. I've had some difficult moments in my career on the women's side, but that was tough. So you do realize how when it's no longer there for a player, you get that sense of, even the weight of this selection, what it means to players to miss out. And I know it's easy for people to pick a squad on the internet and post it and say this guy, but when you've lived for 4 years with men that have been contributing, and their journeys inside out, and the sacrifices they've had to make to travel to places during COVID when their families and friends were telling them not to, there's deeper things that go into these decisions, Chris, and it's a tough time. So as the last question every weekend, you're dreading it. One part is you're going to miss some quality from your team, but the next part is just knowing like the pain that those players are going to go through. So, I think the good thing with Scott, we've got some people around him that are going to provide him with some good support. We have specialists that in the mental emotional side that are checking in with him and making sure that he's able to manage himself through this period. What is it? I mean, we've been clear about what this World Cup is. I think, back in June, we did take the time as a group to really assess where we were at, and just have the cold hard truth of, CONCACAF is a different jungle to the world stage. That this is a different step up, gents. And over these last 4 years, we haven't really prepared you for that step up. Playing in CONCACAF, every single window, it just doesn't prepare you for a match against Belgium, Croatia, and even Morocco, who are a solid team. So we know there's going to be a lot of learning on this journey. The game against Uruguay was our first real test of a perennial World Cup contender, a team that has that tier 1 capability, the next level World Cup opponent. And we learned a lot in that game, but a lot of it was confidence. A lot of what we took as a team was a confidence that, if that's our first experience for a long time against a team of that caliber, then we can fear less going into this tournament. in CONCACAF, we were talking about fear and nothing because we felt we had the team spirit, we had the tactical acumen, we had the players to do the job. But here, we've got to fear a bit more, and I think that experience against Uruguay, I think, helped the staff, helped the players. We've been going through that gap analysis and just understanding, you know, how Uruguay relates now to playing against a Belgium or a Croatia. And then we'll get an experience against Japan, another team that, you know, has shown it can get out the group stages at World Cups and can beat big teams on the world stage. So again, we'll gather more information in that match to help us understand what else it is we can do to ensure, you know, we're closer to that match in Belgium, to being able to impose an identity that, you know, we can be proud of and that can give us a chance. Yeah, I think firstly he's a good footballer. You know, I think that's the first thing I want to talk about here. I mean, you know, when we asked him to step up in the US game against Nashville and go up against Pefek, you know, who was at the time a prolific centre forward, you know, doing well in his club setting. You know, Doneil Henry answered that call when we asked him to go up against Jamaica away. Doneil Henry answers that call. I mean, he's in the right position, in the right climate with this team, and, you know, guys he trusts. And, you know, I think Doneil is a player that can really contribute to the identity of this team. He's got, you know, 50 caps internationally. He understands the build in to an international game. He understands the feel of games. And what I see is he contributes to the players off the field in ways that I think people don't understand, you know, ways that he has those quiet conversations with, you know, players that may be going into a match nervous. He's able to assess centre forwards and, you know, give those golden nuggets to, you know, centre backs that haven't experienced that type of player. So I think there's a starting point on a profile that he brings, and no one's got that profile in you know, the group that we operate with. And then he has an experience that over time, as he's matured as a person, he's definitely been able to transmit an element of leadership to the group. So all round, he's a big man in this environment. He's a guy a lot of the players look up to, and an influencer. And as a player, you know, when he's fit and healthy, can have a big contribution on the field. Yeah, great question. I mean, everything in speaking to Atiba, and I was on the phone to him earlier this week. You know, he feels good, and when I hear those words, you know, that's always a great sign. You know, when you hear Atiba say that, then you know his mind's right, and he's back. Like he's a guy who, if he sets his mind to something, you can achieve it. So, you know, I've had conversations in previous windows where he hasn't felt good, and when I know he hasn't felt good, his mind's not right. And if his mind's not right, you know, he's not really going to be fully invested. So all the signs are positive there, Peter, and I think we're just hoping that they have a cup game coming up in the coming fixtures. That, you know, we're hoping Atiba can get some minutes, some serious minutes in that game to help him prep.